Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The time now being 10:10, I think that we can make a start. My name is Glenn Roach. I'm the Executive Secretary, Port Management Association of the Caribbean, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this Cybersecurity, a proactive approach for ports presentation, hosted by PMAC in collaboration with associate member ADVANTUM. To those of you who may not be already familiar, kindly allow me to briefly introduce the Port Management Association of the Caribbean. PMAC was founded in 1998, having succeeded the Port Management Association of the Eastern Caribbean, established in 1988. The membership currently consists of 19 ports within 18 Caribbean territories, and one of the primary tenets upon which the association was founded is the critical importance of relevant training designed to maximize human resources and effectively meet the ever-increasing challenges of the global environment. Accordingly, PMAC has embarked on a program of scheduled virtual training of all levels of staff in a diverse range of topics. This morning's presentation will be led by Ms. Frances Yeo, Chief Executive Officer of ADVANTUM, with two respected industry experts with over 45 years combined experience in IT security. Mr. John Gibson, Senior Manager, Information Security and Technology Services, Victoria Mutual Group, and Mr. Robert Sinclair, Network Team Lead at ADVANTUM. I just want to indicate to you that it is the intention that this be an interactive session, and we look forward to receiving your comments and questions as we go through the presentation. Therefore, without further ado, I will invite Frances to lead this morning's presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Glenn. Thank you for this opportunity. Just to give persons on the line a little background on ADVANTUM. ADVANTUM, also named originally as Port Computer Services Limited, is a subsidiary of Assessment Recoveries Limited. We were established in 1981 to provide information technology infrastructure and system support to the port community and the wider Caribbean maritime sector. ADVANTUM holds the distinction of being the pioneer in the computerization of the Port of Kingston, one of the hemisphere's premier and strategically located transshipment ports. Currently, ADVANTUM is automating the operations of the Port of Montego Bay that actually went live at the beginning of April, and another main port location, and it's another port located in Jamaica. We've worked with ports in the Caribbean over the years, and we're really pleased to be able to collaborate with PMAC once again to deliver a webinar on an area that we think is of great importance. I have encouraged people just to Google and check and see what is happening in the realm of cybersecurity. I know that just since the beginning of the year, there have been so many attacks and so much of concern. I attended a conference recently, and one of the speakers actually said that when he left a cybersecurity session, he just wanted to lock up in a room and just, not have anything to do with technology. That was a little unusual considering this is somebody that worked in technology, but I can well relate. Having had conversations with John and Robert, I said to them yesterday, you know what? I think I'm returning to Post-it, but they assured me with, proper measures. I didn't just need to return to Post-it and air letters and all those things of the past. So it is with great pleasure that I tell you a bit about our speakers. Firstly, John Gibson is, as Glenn has shared, Senior Manager of Information Security and IT Governance at the VM Group. The VM Group is one of the largest financial companies in Jamaica. John has more than 25 years of experience in information technology with 13 plus years focus and expertise in information security, including network security, application security, and governance risk and compliance. John previously worked with some of the most recognized companies in Jamaica, such as Grace Kennedy and Jamaica Broilers Group, in developing and deploying various enterprise solutions. And he's also worked at T-Tech and was charged with developing and managing innovative security, governance, risk, and compliance solutions. John holds several qualifications and certifications from CISSP, CRISC, and a range of other certifications that persons in this industry in IT security would be familiar with. John sits on the board of directors of ADVANTUM, and he is also responsible for our technical subcommittee. So it is with great pleasure that I welcome him this morning to share some of his expertise with PMAC. Our second speaker who will be supporting John this morning is Robert Sinclair. Robert is the network and team lead for ADVANTUM. He heads a team of highly trained IT engineers in providing managed services and help desk support to our clients. Robert has worked with the Port of Kingston through ADVANTUM for over 20 years. He has been on board from the time that KFTL, which is the larger of our two wharf companies, has been using applications such as Cosmos for their tasks. He has given support to Kingston Wharves and to, of course, the Port of Montego Bay as well. Robert is currently pursuing additional certification in cybersecurity, but he holds professional certifications in Microsoft and Cisco. So I am going to, at this point, just hand over to John and Robert to take us through this morning's presentation, Cybersecurity, a proactive approach for ports. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Francis. It's interesting. I'm always humbled when somebody reads out my bio, because my goal when I set out on this path, on this journey, was just to try to make a difference. Try to help and try to educate and try to build any organization that I'm a part of. So again, I want to thank you, ADVANTUM and the Port Managers Association for this opportunity to speak on this topic that I'm passionate about. I will, hopefully I will convey, some of that passion and some of that knowledge to the members present here today as we go through the presentation. So again, it's intended to be an interactive presentation as we go through. If there are any questions, raise the questions. We will address the questions and clarify information as we go ahead. But before we get into the meat of the matter, I have a quick question. But I preview that question with just a quick scenario. So I think as everyone on this in this meeting should be familiar or should know something, at least one thing about elephants. Elephants are amazing creatures. It's one of my absolute favorite animals. They have a tremendous memory. They memorize things, they keep things in memory for years, for a long period of time. So even if their herd gets separated and they're separated for years, if they're reunited, it's just as if they were never separated. Tremendous memory. But as amazing as elephants are, there's one thing that an elephant cannot do, absolutely cannot do. What is that one thing? What's the one thing that is now impossible for an elephant to do? Somebody, anybody, one thing. There's one thing that an elephant cannot do. It's almost impossible for them to do it.
I believe that it cannot use its feet or those digits to pick up anything. It has to use its trunk. So that's one thing I believe that an elephant will be able to do.
You're close. You're really, really close. Really close. You're very, very close, but not quite.
Help me out, participants. Anybody with any other suggestions?
Anybody? Anybody? Your colleague is very close, very close. They're in the same, they're in the right part of the body.
They can't jump.
Absolutely. Mr. Manchester United, you are correct. Elephants cannot jump. Cannot. It's impossible for elephants to jump because they have no knees. Their knees are, they're not able to push that weight up on their body. So even when they're going down inclines, you will see them rolling down the incline. If they're lying on the ground, they will roll and get up and so on. Elephants cannot jump. Yeah. So that's my fun fact for today. Elephants can't jump. So let's get into our presentation. So today we're going to talk about cybersecurity, as Francis says. And here's a brief overview of our agenda. We're going to look at the foundation pillars of cybersecurity. We're going to take a look at cyber risk management. We're going to take a look at network and critical infrastructure. We're going to look at securing the human, and we're going to look at some examples that have affected the shipping and logistics industry. Now, the approach to this, folks, is we're going to mix a bit of technical, a bit of operation, and a bit of real world scenarios. One of the things that has happened and that I have found in my years of both consulting and practicing in the field is that the cybersecurity discipline, no matter what industry you fall in, no matter where you're operating in, the principles are pretty much the same. The principles extend regardless of the industry that you're operating in. So notwithstanding the majority of my background being in finance, right? Securing financial systems are critical to the viability and the running of a country. Likewise, securing the port and logistics operations and the shipping industry of a country is also critical to the operation of a country. And some of the technologies that are used are actually identical. They're just used in a different way. So the basis for the presentation is to go through some of the fundamentals in information security or cybersecurity. The terms are used synonymously, and we'll just go through that. So first off, we'll look at the foundation pillars. Now, in cybersecurity or information security, we have a saying called the CIA triad, and that stands for confidentiality, the I is for integrity, and the A is for availability. Now, these pillars put together form the foundation. Every single thing in information security or cybersecurity is built on these pillars. No matter what you do, no matter where you go, it's built on having information confidential, having integrity, and having availability of the systems. So, confidentiality. Confidentiality means the prevention of unauthorized disclosure of information to systems, to individuals, to organizations, to anything outside of the intended recipient of that information. Now, to maintain confidentiality, it's important for the continued operation of the business. You don't want information that should not be available to an unauthorized person being available to them in a situation where, of course, something like, you manifest the contents of a particular shipping cargo, contents of a particular cargo, and so on, could be sensitive information. You don't necessarily want that information to be readily available to anyone anywhere else. So you want information to remain confidential. So it must be disclosed only to authorized individuals, and it must only be disclosed on a need-to-know basis. So yes, even though the information is available and available to be shared, it must only be shared with those who absolutely need to know what the information is. So confidentiality. So some of the controls that we can use to put in place to maintain confidentiality include encryption. So encrypting data. You encrypt the data, either you encrypt the machine that has the data on it, or you encrypt the data stream. Many persons, when you're browsing, you may be familiar. If you look at the address bar in the browser, you'll notice that it has a little padlock on it. That little padlock on the address bar signifies that the communication that you're sending is encrypted, and encryption is a method of maintaining confidentiality. What that means is that even if somebody was able to snoop and get access to the stream of data that's passing over that connection, they would not be able to read it. Right? Using passwords or passphrase. Now, passwords is kind of a double-edged sword. Other members in the industry would suggest that passwords are dying. There's a part of me that agrees with that, but it's still an essential method of protecting and ensuring confidentiality of data. We have some very powerful systems today, powerful systems at our disposal. So breaking a password is a relatively simple exercise in and of itself. However, if you start to expand the complexity of the password, if you go into things like passphrases, then breaking a password or a passphrase becomes much more complex. I'll give you an example. I don't use passwords for my passwords. I use phrases. So, a popular phrase or something like that may come to mind, and I use it. It may be a complete sentence, because typically systems don't limit the maximum number of characters that you can use for a password or a passphrase. So you can get as creative as you want. And the longer it is, the more permutation of numbers, characters, and so on in there, the more difficult it becomes to correct. Of course, you need to remember that so you can get access to your own information, your own data. Layering on top of passwords is a practice or a feature that we call two-factor authentication, also referred to as multi-factor authentication. What that means is it's something that you have, or something that you know, or something that you are. So in addition to your password to log into your systems, you will have a token that generates a code that further validates you. Or you will have a system that scans your fingerprint that further validates you. Or if you may be entering a building or something like that, then you have maybe a retina scan or a palm scan or something like that. So two-factor authentication, simply put, or multi-factor authentication, simply put, is a second method of verifying authentication. So you submit your password and you say, all right, fine, John has submitted his password, but let me verify that John is actually who is submitting this password. So let me send him a message on his mobile phone for him to confirm that he actually logged in. This is particularly important when you're handling systems that has highly sensitive information and highly confidential information. You want to ensure that you verify that the person who is logging in is the actual person that's logging in. And two, you want to ensure that confidentiality is maintained by you authorizing that person to access the data. Again, I spoke a little bit about biometrics. A lot of these systems today have implemented biometrics as part of their authentication method. It does go a far way. It's maybe the most advanced method here of maintaining confidentiality. You can always combine all of these factors together to give you maybe the absolute confidentiality around information, around systems. There's no rule of thumb that says you must use one or the other. You can use a combination of them. You can use all of them if you so desire. And that will achieve a significant level of confidentiality in your systems. Right? So we move on to integrity. Again, integrity means maintaining and assuring that the data cannot be modified in an unauthorized or undetected manner. When you send information from one person to another, when information is transmitted from one system to another, you want to ensure that that information has not been modified or has not been changed en route, and therefore bringing into question the integrity of that information. You need to be able to trust the information that once it leaves its source, it arrives at its destination in the manner that it was intended to arrive at its destination in. That way you can trust that information is correct. You can trust that the information is consistent, and that sound decisions can be made based off the information that is received. You don't have a question whether, these systems that are talking to each other, is there an interruption? Is there a question around the validity of the data that is coming across? Integrity is often fall victim to a phenomenon we call man-in-the-middle attack in information security, where information is sent. Some third party in the middle will listen to that information. They'll take a copy of it, modify it, and then retransmit it along the way, so that when it gets to the recipient, it looks very different than what it was saying. Emails actually fall victim to man-in-the-middle attack and failures in integrity quite often, because I don't know if a lot of persons know, but once your email gets out on the internet, if you are not using, say, an email encryption system, then your email is in clear text for the world to see between the time when you send it and the time when it reaches to its recipient. Hopefully I don't scare anybody with that, but yes, emails are sent in clear text for the most part, and it's visible, completely visible on the internet. All right, let's look at some controls. That we can put in place to maintain integrity. Again, encryption is going to be a recurring theme because it's one of the most powerful tools that we have in our arsenal as information security practitioners. Right? Utilization of access controls, i.e., you utilize a system where only authorized persons have access to it, and there's a method of verification of that of those persons who have access to the system. Therefore, if information is sent, when it is received, the recipient already have some kind of key that allow them to verify the information. Utilization of version control. Version control is again a very important tool, and it's available in a lot of your common systems today. It's available in the Office suite of products. You're able to set a particular version of a file, particular version of a document, so that when it is sent, when it is transmitted, when it is received, there can be a verification that, oh, the version that I'm receiving is the legitimate version. And we do that through things like hashing and so on. Right. Backup and recovery. Backup and recovery procedures, again, another important tool or another important control in maintaining integrity. If it is, you back up your data regularly, you back up your systems regularly, because should a change happen that brings the integrity of the system into question, then you can fully restore your systems. Now, backup and recovery oftentimes is viewed as an infrastructure or a organization-wide activity, but it's as simple as having a process in place that once you've completed a document, once you've finalized on it, and you agree that this is the final version of the document, then you simply just make a backup copy of it and keep it somewhere and keep that as the master copy, so that if there's an issue, you can always revert to that copy. A little bit further up the chain is the utilization of error detection software. So you use an application or you use a software on your system that verifies and checks the file to see if there are any errors. So each file type of any kind, no matter what system it's on, whether it's on a computer at the port, a computer in the bank, whether it's on a crane, a truck, doesn't matter what, all of them have a process or a system in there that checks to verify that the signature of the file is actually the file. So a quick example of some things that I've seen. So I've seen where somebody may send a Word document, but the Word document contains an executable, meaning it contains a file that can perform some action. Typically, Word documents don't do that. So, within the Microsoft suite of products and so on and other security tools, there's a built-in feature or there's a function that checks the file to say, all right, this file is supposed to be a document file and not an executable. So if the file comes over and it's behaving like an executable, then we are to do things to stop it or block it or prevent it from executing. So any kind of error detection software that's available, most modern systems and modern applications now do have the function built in. We have the option of turning it off. I'm going to recommend to the IT guys on this call that we don't turn it off. Sometimes it can create a little bit of an overhead for the application in terms of the performance and so on, but it serves a security purpose. It serves a purpose of verifying the integrity of the files that are being transmitted. And with the advent of things like ransomware today, don't want to turn that off. You want to be able to verify that file types that are coming over are the actual file types that you're expecting, and communication to and from systems is actually in the manner that you want it to be in. All right. As we move on to availability. Now, availability is more akin and more aligned to IT, to information technology, to infrastructure and application than it is to information security. But you can't secure a system that you don't know about, that you don't have, that's not up and that's not running. Right? So it becomes very important. There are malicious individuals out there who are bent on bringing the availability of systems down, bringing the availability of systems offline, and thereby advancing their cost. The, distributed denial of service is one such. Ransomware is maybe the most common example of attacks against availability. Availability simply means that information and the systems should be readily accessible for the authorized users. It does make sense that you have a system and you say, boy, you know, the server is on or the application is up and running, but nobody can access it, right? You know, that's not availability. Availability means that whatever device, whatever application, whatever server, whatever system that's running must be available to authorized users of the system. Conversely, not available to unauthorized users as you kind of layer things on and package things together. Some of the key controls that can be put in place to maintain and improve availability. Offsite backups. Offsite backups are very, very important, especially if you're operating in a system, in a situation where you don't have the ability to run hot sites or redundant sites. Then having a good backup procedure, having a good set of backups is very, very, very important. And storing the backups offsite. And offsite though means storing the backup in the room, in the building across the road. Geographically, that's too close. If there is a fire, earthquake, a storm, or something like that, then you know that building is also affected. Also, you know, if the person that's attacking the system figures out that your backups are stored in the building across the road, you know, they can attack that building as well, and you know, you won't have access to your backups. Backups go hand in hand with disaster recovery. Disaster recovery is very, very, very important for availability of systems. Again, often not associated with information security, but if a system should go down because of a cyber attack, then you want to be able to invoke both your backup and recovery procedures as well as your disaster recovery procedure, because a cyber incident could lead to a complete shutdown of your operations, in which now means you need to activate your disaster recovery plans and move forward with that. Redundancies, if you have the ability, always implement redundancies, always implement as best as possible a hot redundant site, so that you know you're switching from your traditional, your confirmed production site to your backup site happens seamlessly, and there's little to no disruption in the business. Of course, having a hot site is an expensive undertaking, so you have to examine your budgets to see if that's something that you can support. But as you step back down from hot to warm to cold, all of those are effective redundant sites. It's just the procedures for bringing those sites back online differs depending on whether they're hot, cold, or warm. Right? Again, failover goes hand in hand with redundancy. If you have a hot site, then you don't have to worry about failover. Failover happens automatically for you. If you have a warm site, then there is some effort that you need to put in place to bring that site online. If it's a cold site, then definitely you're going to have to go to that site, probably go to that site physically, restore a backup, that sort of stuff, bring the systems back online. And of course, proper monitoring, information security monitoring, network monitoring, always incredibly important, because they give you an eye, they give you an indication of what's taking place in your environment. Now, it could be that something is happening in the environment, but it's like it's flying below the radar. Maybe your systems are generating 100 alerts per day, when it really ought to be generating maybe 3 or 4 or 5. But because it's so far, it's below the threshold, you may not see it. But your alerting system, your monitoring system may be able to bring that together and say, oh, all right, here, and notice that our average alert generation for the month has been about 100 alerts, 100 alerts for the month. But given the trend that we are on, in this week alone, we've generated 500 alerts. So let us take a second look at that, because we are now 5 times our monthly average. Alerts will bring those things to the fore. Implementing environmental controls, your monitoring of your temperature monitoring, your people monitoring, your movement and that sort of stuff, also important for availability. Virtualization has become the way of the world today. I don't know any IT shop let me call it that, that's running their environment on physical infrastructure today. Yes, there is some physical structure that's needed to run the virtualized environment, but you're not going to find a server infrastructure now with a room full with racks and racks and racks of servers. Everything is running virtualized now. And virtualization allows you to do numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4 actually very easily, and also at a reduction in the cost. You still want to do server clustering, and which is, even if you're running a virtualized environment, you want to have a second cluster, which is 2 environments running together, so that if there's a failure in one environment, then you automatically fail to the other. And the continuity of operations planning, again, also very important for availability. Right. So those are the pillars. Those are the foundation pillars of cybersecurity. Everything that we do in cybersecurity falls on top of these pillars: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, let's move on to risk management. Risk management, as I've said before in other forums, cybersecurity is a journey and not necessarily a destination. So you don't go to a place and say, all right, fine, I've put in all the security measures that I can put in. I put in all the technology, I have all the people, and I have all the processes in place. Now I'm secure. Cybersecurity is a journey of risk management and continuous improvement. So you assess your risk in the environment, you look at something, you figure out, all right, I'm fine with this, I've accepted the risk, I've mitigated the risk, I've transferred the risk, or whatever that is, right? Fine. You start that process all over again. So it's a process of risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation, and of course, absolutely key, and this is where a lot of people fall down, in actual documentation of the risk. Very, very important to document your risk. But we're gonna go into each quadrant in a little more detail now. So first, let us talk about risk identification. You can't put risk management around what you don't know, right? Likewise, you can't secure what you don't know. So the first thing you want to do is you want to identify all your assets, all your information assets, whether that is data, applications, infrastructure, networking, it doesn't matter what it is. You need to identify all your assets, right? Once you've identified and catalog all the assets, now you need to identify the threats that are associated with that. So let us take, the navigation system or the port side systems at various ports. We've identified all the different systems that are needed for the operation, of a ship's navigation system or anything like that. What are some of the threats that would affect those systems? Could viruses, could those devices be infected with viruses and thereby rendering them unusable? Could those devices be affected by denial of service attacks, ransomware, and so on and so forth? So we identify the threats that are associated with the assets that we have. And it's very important because not all assets are affected by the same threats. So again, this is why it is very important to do the evaluation. I've seen a lot of organizations have taken the approach the other way around, where they look at the threats to the organization and they spend a lot of money implementing all of these processes, all of these procedures for technology and so on. And they still suffer significant cyber incidents. Why did they suffer cyber incidents? Because they didn't take the opportunity to look at just what assets do they have in their organization. What devices are in use, what computers are in use, what are our users doing, so that they can better map the threats to the assets that are there. And I've seen it on more than one occasion, where a company will spend a lot of money putting in a particular type of technology, but it doesn't work for them simply because they don't have the asset that technology is intended to protect. Now, the cybersecurity technology landscape is very mature, it's very exhaustive. You implement as deep as your pockets are. You implement as shallow as your pockets are. So whatever solutions or whatever systems you have in place, there's a conceivable security solution for that. All it is a matter of how much money you are willing to spend or not willing to spend, right? Having identified the threats against your assets, then you want to identify what could go wrong if some of these threats would materialize. What could go wrong if one of my systems get exploited? What does it mean if the navigation systems on a ship, on a cargo vessel should fail because of a cyber incident? once you identify what could go wrong, then we can start to take the other steps to resolve and to recover from any potential issues there. So again, risk identification, first and foremost, very importantly, identify your assets, identify what the assets are. Then you identify the threats that are against those assets, and then you identify what could go wrong. PMAC, I see you have your hand raised. Sorry, give me your name, please.
This is Glenn Roach.
Glenn, sorry, yes, can go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of identifying threats, I was wondering, we have some technology now where persons actually access the various systems through their own cell phones. What level of threat is that in terms of the persons being responsible enough using their own personal assets to access systems, company systems, and that? What level of threat does that pose?
So, and let me just clarify. You're speaking an external entity to your organization.
I'm talking about specifically employees. Some systems, like for instance, maybe a rostering system or something like that, might have employees being able to access the system via their own cell phones. And some systems are even downloadable to the cell phone of the particular employees. So my question is, these are personal devices, that are exposed to a lot of different applications and stuff like that, right? They're not dedicated specifically for use, business use. So what is the level of threat of into these devices and maybe access the company systems via those devices?
Okay, so in a situation like that, you face several threats. You face threats from malware. You face threats from exploitation. You face the threats from data breaches and so on. The risk with that situation is actually pretty high, very, very high, as a matter of fact, because of the kind of data that you're allowing your users, your team members to access. Now, what you want to do is you actually want to quickly get to a place of risk mitigation where that is concerned. Again, the particular scenario that is coming to mind now will affect two things: integrity and confidentiality from our previous slides. So integrity may be the most foremost of that information. So you can't control what your employees are doing on their own personal phone, right? You absolutely can't control that. So if they want to go to some questionable site or whatever, you have no control over that. What you need to do is you need to put a system in place that allows the safe access of that information, for argument's sake. So in the scenario that you painted, one of my recommendations to you would be to prevent the download of the file to the device. I'm not sure the intricacies of the system. Maybe Francis and her team can take a look at that. But what you want to do is, if there's a control available for you to restrict, allow them to view the information but not download it, then that would be a way that you could mitigate some of the threats that are available there. What that would also do is, one, it will prevent the data from being changed, but also it will prevent any kind of malware or any kind of malicious activity that's taking place on the phone to affect your system via that file transfer or file access method. So I would look at that. Again, there are systems out there in place in the world today that will allow you to do what we call containerization of the device. So if the employee is willing, you could implement a system that creates a container. So if there's a container for them and their personal stuff that you won't get involved with, but it creates a container for the business as well, so that your applications, your files, your data can reside in that container and there's no communication between both containers. So even if the person's phone is lost or stolen, if the person's phone is hacked or anything like that, you maintain a control over your container on the phone, and you can always erase it, delete it, prevent access to it, or whatever you want, where that is concerned.
John?
Yes.
If I may also add, I think with regards to that, you probably will want to implement policies for your users.
Absolutely.
Like bring your own device policies and things like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. One of the guiding, especially when you're dealing with users, you don't need to get into things that could affect you legally, and so on. So yes, you actually want to implement the relevant policies and procedures. Mobile device management policies, BYOD, or bring your own device policies and procedures are very important tools that will also help you in that. And of course, you have to get the employee's consent, and especially in an era that we're in now where data protection becomes very important, and it's starting to come to the fore. You know, or your employees, your customers, and so on are not going to treat lightly with the data that you have access to in their possession. So yes, I agree, Robert, completely. You have to have the requisite policy and procedural framework in place to do that.
I also would like to make an observation, because we have several applications which have apps to go along with them. I think of like e-labor, where we have an app that stevedores can use as part of the whole scheduling of work. And what I know we do is that the user access and the segmentation, in terms of only certain users can access certain information, that is also critical in terms of setting up the permissions, etc. So that could mitigate against the risk of, accessing data, and, to nefarious means, etc. I don't know, Robert, if you have any insight in that, especially as to what has been done with, say, our clients in using e-labor and other apps. You're muted, Robert.
Sorry, sorry. Yeah, well, I know for most of those applications, Francis, there's a level of security first where the user has to be authenticated before they can, even though it might be on their device, they have to authenticate with a user and password before they can go into that application. And once in, as you say, it is configured for them to just go where they should go and use what they should use. So the layer of securities are there within the application.
Yeah. So access control is very critical. So I'll just kind of wrap that up by saying, yeah, the requisite policies and procedures need to be in place. The requisite access controls need to be in place, and of course some kind of technology that limits access to the data and then limit access to the device. I hope that clarifies for you at least a little bit. All right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. All right. So let's move on to the analysis. Now, having identified the risks that are associated with the technology or with your business with respect to cybersecurity or information security, you want to determine the likelihood of these things happening. What's the likelihood of malware getting in the navigation systems of a ship? What's the likelihood of malware getting on one of the control units that runs one of the cranes, or any one of the sensors at the ports? Right? Determine the likelihood. You also want to determine the impact. What is the impact of that happening, of those compromises taking place? What would it mean for your business? And then you move to a place where you rank the likelihood. And in ranking the likelihood, you will get a better sense of what kind of mitigation you would take. So here is a sample of an evaluation matrix for different risks. And this can be used for any kind of risk. We use this one in the cyberspace quite a bit. So you look at your risk, your risk severity, whether it's negligible, minor, moderate, severe, or very severe. And you look at your probability, whether it's rare, unlikely, possible, likely, or highly likely. And you score everything between 1 and 5, right? And so now in scoring, you'll get a figure that shows you, all right, is this risk very high? Sorry. Is this risk very high? Is this risk high, medium? Is this risk low? What is the classification of this risk? And that classification helps you to implement the appropriate mitigation strategy to cover that risk. Now, again, you want to implement a mitigation that covers the specific risks. It's because it's a process of continual evaluation. It sometimes don't make sense to implement a mitigation that cover several of them. Implement the mitigation that covers the risk, because you're going to have to review it. So you could very well spend money to implement a mitigation that you believe is going to mitigate other activities, but in your review, those activities never materialize. So you would have wasted that money. So this tool is a very useful tool in helping to determine the level of mitigation that is added, that is appropriate for each risk that's identified. In the management of risk, you want to do one of three things. You either want to avoid it, if the risk outweighs the benefits of having the product or service or doing the business. Discontinuing the activity may be a course of action if it means no longer being exposed to it. So if the risk is so great that it affects the complete viability of your operation, or viability of the business, then you have to ask yourself the hard question: do I really want to continue to do this? This is something that I want to avoid. And that's a very high example. There are several other examples below that as you kind of step down. Also, a risk mitigation strategy could be to transfer the risk. So you share a portion of the risk with other parties, maybe through cyber insurance, through outsourcing operations to a third party. So you as an example, let me use outsourcing as an example. You may be running an entity, or you may be having an operation that you need to have cybersecurity personnel on staff, or you may need to implement some kind of technology, but you don't have the capacity to do that. Having a third party handle that for you, having a third party take over the running of your information security practice, or the management of an application or service, could be a method of transferring the risk. Now, that entity now becomes responsible for ensuring that the requisite procedures and technology and all of that stuff in place for you to maintain a viable risk posture. Cyber insurance is actually very, very, very important. I know we're in the Caribbean and in Latin America to some extent, we're kind of lagging behind the rest of the world where cyber insurance is concerned. And that is partly because we have a minimalist mindset on cybersecurity. We believe that as a region, as individual countries, we are too small for anything cyber to happen in our region. And if it does, the question I often hear here in Jamaica is, yes, my company is a little small company. What would hackers or what would cyber criminals want with my company? But I say that I say to those persons that that's exactly why a cyber criminal would want your company, because you have not taken any kind of precautions. You have not made it difficult for them to get into your system. So they can just come in and commandeer your system and take control of it and use it. So even if you don't have anything of perceived value on your systems, what your organization and your systems could become, your organization could become a pawn in the wider network. So they could just use your system to launch cyber attacks against other entities. Cyber insurance is very important, and it's something that in the Caribbean and Latin America we ought to pay a closer attention to. Certainly, it helps us in the event that we do have a cyber incident. There is a way we can recover from this financially. There's a financial recovery that can be had with this. Now, given the many cyber attacks that are taking place around the world, we found ourselves in a situation where insurance premiums are starting to go up very high. And I'm cognizant that we're in a region where our revenues are traditionally low or typically low, so we need to be mindful of that. But again, cyber insurance is very important. A third strategy would be to mitigate the risk. So you deploy some control or some measure, do some kind of implementation, make some change, do something to reduce the likelihood and or the impact, and therefore the level of risk that you will face. So 3 things in terms of risk management: either you want to avoid it altogether. If you can't avoid it, you either transfer it or you put in a control that will mitigate the risk that you're facing. And we come to the fourth, and maybe one of the most important areas in this whole risk management process, and that is documentation. Yes, I know, we don't like to document things. Again, I've worked in IT for 20 odd years, 20 something odd years. Yeah, we really don't like to document. And it's not just in IT, it's other parts of our business as well. We really don't like to document things. But it's very important that we document risk. Document all the risk, all the identified risk scenarios in our risk register. And a risk register can be a very simple document, an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. That just captures the risk, the date you identified the risk, any existing control that you might have, what the current risk level is, right? What your risk treatment plan is. And your risk treatment plan is the activities and the timelines to bring the risk within an acceptable tolerance. So you want to, what are the activities that you're going to take to minimize your exposure to this risk? Your progress status in the implementation of the treatment plan, and what the residual risk is. So having done your implementation, have you done your mitigations and so on? How much of this risk still resides or remains? And of course, very importantly, the risk owner, the individual or group responsible for ensuring that the residual risk remain within the tolerance. Now, that person is responsible for initiating the continuous review, so that you figure out, whether the risk will continue or it will increase or change. All right, so that's risk management in a nutshell. Let's move on to the other areas. Let's look at critical infrastructure, critical and network infrastructure. Now, a lot of times, or the majority of the times when you speak about cybersecurity, this is probably the facet that comes to the fore the most, right? You look at network security, you're always talking about networking breach or stuff like that. So your network security or your perimeter security comes to the fore. Now, here are some of the elements that go into your perimeter security. Intrusion detection and prevention, right? And this is a system that prevents malicious individuals from getting into your system. Quite different from, so intrusion prevention and detection are different. Intrusion prevention prevents them from getting into your system. Intrusion detection tells you if they see them in your systems, right? Denial of service prevention, again, prevents your systems from going down through because of a denial of a service attack, an attack that floods your network with traffic and thereby rendering your systems inaccessible. You want to utilize unified threat management. You want to use a simple firewall. It's a very modern piece of technology, very useful, very low-hanging fruit. You buy it, you install it, and it runs. And it does offer monitoring capabilities and so on. You want to also implement network access control. And network access control simply means that you put some technology or process in place that controls who has access to your network. So somebody can't just come to your office and plug in and get access to your network. Somebody can, use their device at home and access your network without utilizing something like a VPN or something like that. So network access control is very important. And lastly, on here, there are a lot of other elements, but for the purposes of this discussion, we look at penetration testing and vulnerability assessment. Very, very important. Penetration testing simulates a hacker or a malicious individual trying to get access to your system. However, you do this in a controlled manner, right? So therefore, they will perform the same kind of task that a hacker would. But what they're doing is they're coming back to you with a report and a plan that's a hero. We found all of these openings in the perimeter of your network, right? Hackers could actually come in through these openings. Let us do, here are some things that you can do to prevent that from happening. Vulnerability testing is a similar situation. You scan your environment, scan your devices, scan your application to find the weakness, because there are inherent weaknesses in every single application, every single process, every single technology, every single system has an inherent weakness. So you want to do scans on those environments just to see where your weak points are. Now, Robert actually has some very good insight in this. I'm going to hand over to him for a couple of minutes for him to just run through a couple of slides on network security. Robert, I'm going to stop here. So bring up your couple of slides.
Thank you, John. Morning again, everyone. Let me just share my screen with you. Can you see my screen, everyone?
No, we're not seeing.
No,
No?
we're not seeing it. No, we're not seeing it yet. We're seeing you, but we're not seeing your screen.
Can you see me? Share it again. Are you seeing it? No?
Still not seeing it.
No,
Did you unshare, John?
Yes.
Oh,
I
okay.
stopped sharing. Yes.
Sharing.
I think it's starting now.
Seeing it now?
Yeah, we're seeing it.
Yeah.
All right. So John touched on a few topics on
full
network
screen.
security.
Go to full screen.
Go full screen or word.
There you go.
Okay. So here is a diagram of infrastructure security and potential threats that can affect. Let me go back to the diagram. That can affect it. And as you can see, here we have your switch, your server, router, firewall, and all of those things. How do we mitigate against the threats in all of these devices? So your network, on your local area network, you want to perform some of these steps that I have here. You want to perform segmentation. So from on your switches, like I don't know if any network admins are in the house or in the forum. On your switches, you want to segment the network by setting up what they call VLANs. So that's virtual local area networks. So you separate the traffic, like from your servers, you want to have them on a specific VLAN, your computers, you want to have them on a specific, even from a department level. So your accounts department, you want to put them in a particular VLAN. So all of this is based on how secure you want your network and your data to be. So your VLAN traffic will determine who sees what and so forth. Access control, as John spoke about that, the prevention of unauthorized users and devices from accessing the network. And not just the network, and even files on the network, you can get granular down to file levels. You want to put on shares. You want to put on shares on your files and things like that, and make sure it is secured against who. So like if you have an Active Directory, for example, you want to make sure that only who is permitted to see certain files can see them. And you put on the requisite security for those. Your firewall, which would be like infrastructure device, as John spoke about. You want to configure that in such a way that only the traffic that is needed can come into the network and also leave the network. And for remote access, you want to set up what they call VPNs through your firewalls. So the VPN allows configuration of a secure tunnel along with authentication for a user. So you're working from home, you want to set up a VPN on a firewall that a user can use. So I don't know who asked a question about this application running on the phone. Another way to securing that is putting a VPN client on that phone. So the users authenticate through the VPN before they can access the application. So it's another level of security. All right. Email security, John touched on that a little. You want to make sure you have the filtering in place for anti-spam. I mean, some may get through. Also, you want to have antivirus protection on your email, data encryption, as John had spoken about, image and content control. So you want to make sure your email server is configured so that not everything can come in. So John spoke about executable files. You want to turn things like those off so you don't get them in an email. So once you get an email with an executable, it can either strip it, delete the mail, and notify the relevant authorities about that, you know. So those are a few.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Robert. So we're going to touch on one or two of those in a little bit more detail in the subsequent slides. So stop share, Robert. Let me put back up my presentation and continue.
Okay.
All right, so we spoke a little bit about the perimeter and network security. Let's now talk about the endpoint. Endpoint is all your devices, your laptops, desktops, phones, handheld devices, you know, all your everything that is at the end of your system, the things that the users interact with directly. Again, on your endpoint devices, you want to encrypt your data. You want to do two things. You want to either encrypt the data or encrypt the disk. Right, and you can do both as well. You can encrypt the disk as the entire disk in the device or the entire memory in the device, or you can just encrypt the data. You want to implement mobile device management. We kind of touched on it a little bit, speaking about bring your own device policies. We kind of spoke about a little bit about, you know, the kind of controls that you want to put in place to allow persons to access a device, access data on a device that doesn't necessarily belong to you. But mobile device management, that is just one component. It takes into consideration, including your own devices as well. You want to implement anti-malware, antivirus solutions on your devices. Now, this is a really low-hanging fruit. Antivirus solution, anti-malware solutions are actually relatively cheap nowadays. So you just put it in. It takes care of a lot of the low-hanging noise and a lot of taps on your doors for people checking in to see if this is a system that they can break into. Of course, you want to implement patch management, and patch management simply is when your vendor, your software vendor, your hardware vendor issue updates, in particular security updates for your devices. You want to just go ahead and install those devices. You want to harden your device, and device hardening means that you are limiting the attack surface of your device. So all the ports, unnecessary ports that are open, you want to close those. All the unnecessary apps and applications that you have utilizing, you want to close those. And let me give you a quick example. So when you, on your mobile phone, when you buy your phone and you start to set it up and so on, all these applications that are installed on there, and you start to configure them, and you see things like they want to access your phone records, they want to access your camera, sorry, they want to access your storage and so on. Hardening your phone simply means looking at those applications and say, all right, am I ever going to use any of these applications? So let me remove it from the device, because what you're doing is you're removing a potential vulnerability from the device. Let me look at whether this application really needs to have access to my phone records. Famously, the other day, I was installing a banking app on my phone, and the app asked me if I could allow it to have access to my call records. Now, why would a banking app need to access my call records? It doesn't need to, right? So I subsequently went into the settings for the app and then turned off that functionality. So that's how you go about hardening the device. So any application that you're not using, remove it. Any port that's open that you're not using, close it. Anything that you have on your machine that you're not, pretty much keep the device as slim and as lean as possible. Doing that, you reduce your attack surface. Implement identity and access controls. We spoke about that a little bit, you know, set up, you know, the requisite user accounts on the devices. Therefore, somebody cannot access the devices as an anonymous user. All accounts must be tied to somebody, right? And again, we spoke a little bit about your handheld devices, which are a little different from your mobile devices. You know, we're talking about the devices that you use to scan on the ports, scan containers, and that sort of stuff. A similar method. Those devices run operating systems that you want to harden. You want to remove unused application. You want to close any open ports. You want to just keep the device as lean as possible. All right. Let's look at web security. Now, web and application security. This speaks to the security measures that you take for your application and your web presence. So your website, you need to put in security for your website. Your website needs to be behind a web access firewall, whether you are hosting your website or your hosting provider. So if you're not hosting your website, check with your provider to make sure that your website is behind a web access firewall. You also want to conduct vulnerability and penetration testing on your web and applications for the same reason you do that on your network. You want to figure out, so if a real hacker should attack my website or my application, what are they able to compromise it? You do the vulnerability scan to figure out, are there any weak points in my web presence or my app or my applications? Again, you want to implement identity and access control. You don't necessarily want to allow access to your systems via the anonymous route. Allowing access via the anonymous route always opens the door for hackers to get into your system. Again, implement denial of service prevention, implement data obfuscation, which means it's masking data, hiding data so that it's not visible or not usable by somebody who doesn't have access to it. So what that may mean is that rather than using account numbers or client names or that sort of stuff, you use record identifiers. So, you know, you put in a record identifier, and then in the backend, that identifier knows that it must go and pull up John Gibson's record. It must go and pull up these transactions or these files and stuff for John Gibson. All right. And of course, use session termination. If your session remains idle, no matter what it is, whether it is an application, whether it is a web, whether it is a computer or whatever, once the session remains idle for a particular period of time, you want to terminate that session. Keeping sessions open, again, allows the session to continually run in memory. And once the session is continually running, then the session will always be vulnerable to somebody attacking the session. So always perform session termination. An example of session termination that may be readily identifiable is you're locking off your computer. You should set your computer in such a way that once you walk away from it, if the computer is idle, if you have not clicked on the mouse or any keys or anything like that for a specified period of time, then the screen automatically locks. That is a layman's or a trivial method of session termination. All right. We want to look at Internet of Things. This is very popular, and I think you guys should connect to this very well, because you have a lot of devices that are not necessarily seen as computers that are running in the port system, a lot of sensors and all of that sort of stuff. So Internet of Things is simply anything that has a microchip in it that is able to connect to a network. And once it's able to connect to a network, then it's able to connect to the internet. So you're talking things like, out in the real world, you're talking things like your computers, light bulbs, speakers, your smart TVs, smart devices in your homes, you know, cars, and so on. The traffic cameras around the islands, you know, all the communication systems on your ships, on the ports, and all of those are considered Internet of Things. There are things that are not necessarily, it's not that they don't necessarily have a screen like a laptop or something that you can go and click on, but they have a microprocessor, they have wireless technology built in them, they have Bluetooth technology built into them, and they can connect to some kind of a network. Again, as I said before a couple of times, you can't secure what you don't know. So in your Internet of Things environment, in your IoT environment, you have to learn the environment. So scan the environment to see just what devices you have in your environment that's able to connect to some kind of network. Scan the devices and identify them. Once you've identified them, then you classify them. Again, you segment the devices into, so for argument's sake, you want all the devices that run the access control system, so the port, you want those in a segment by themselves. You don't want those devices being tampered with or having access to any other system, right? Again, you will see vulnerability and penetration testing. Again, it's a very useful tool to figure out what is going on in the environment and control and put in the necessary controls. Again, we spoke about access control and authentication methodologies. All of those things are very important because your Internet of Things devices are literally just computers. So the same kind of steps that you would take with your laptop, with your phone, with your desktop, with your server, and so on, you take those same kind of measures with the devices that are classified Internet of Things devices. All right. So in cybersecurity, there's a saying, and please don't get offended, anybody. But we often say that our users are the weakest links. So a computer doesn't have any emotions. A computer not going to get upset, and so on and so forth. But somebody going to come to work and they may not have slept well last night, and they're pissed off. They're like, listen, whatever. So it affects how they operate. So all the technology that you put in place, all these procedures that you put in place, could be undone simply because somebody's upset and are not in a good frame of mind. So as a result of that, and a result of the emotional part of us as humans, we often refer to the human as the weakest link in cybersecurity. Now, humans fall victim to all kinds of things: phishing attacks are the #1 cyber attacks, are the #1 gateway into systems. A lot of these breaches that you've heard about across the world today happened as a result of a simple phishing email. And what is a phishing email? Phishing is a type of social engineering attack that often used to steal data, including login credentials and credit card numbers. It's a method of tricking people into thinking that they're looking at a legitimate email when it really is not. Right? The example that I have here is a very common one. You don't buy anything from Amazon, yet in your email you get an alert that either your Amazon password needs to change or a package has been shipped for you and you need to click on this link to update the delivery instructions and so on. You never buy that from Amazon. Why are you getting this email? But there's a part of you that say, say, I really wanted to get something from Amazon, but you haven't done it. So you see this email and you go click on the link. When you click on the link, you realize it opens up what we call a logic bomb on your computer. So the hackers are now in your system trying to get your login credentials, your financial data, credit card numbers, and so on, and further compromise the system. Now, there are a couple of types of phishing. There's general email phishing where they will send out millions and millions of emails with the hope of getting somebody to click on it. But there's spear phishing email, which is much more targeted. So the person will study the environment, study your company, and they say, oh, all right, so John is a decision maker in this company. Francis is a decision maker. Let me send a specific email to them with the hope of them clicking on it. So spear phishing is very, very targeted. The hackers will spend quite a bit of time doing reconnaissance, studying your environment, and making a conscious decision to send a specifically crafted email to you with the hope of you clicking on a malicious link or download a file. Then there's whale phishing, again, similar to a regular email phishing, but what they do is they cast a very wide net around a particular subject. So while email phishing is just scatter, they will send out anything, anytime, anywhere. Whale phishing is more around a specific subject. So in the shipping industry, you will get phishing emails that are surrounding shipping and logistics and container movement and ports and all of that sort of stuff, right? But you won't necessarily see a phishing email that would be targeted at a bank or something like that. So it's very targeted in the environment that you're in. Right? I specified ransomware here. I took it out specifically because it's one of the #1 threats that we face in the world today. Several of your members have suffered ransomware attacks, and we'll talk about a couple of examples, in a couple of slides from now. But the Colonial Pipeline compromise almost a year ago now in the U.S., where the oil pipeline on the eastern seaboard of the U.S. was shut down, was as a result of ransomware, as a result of a user in the environment clicking on a file that they should not have clicked on, and it opened a ransomware file on the network, and thereby shutting down Colonial Pipeline. They paid, I think, about $4 million to recover to the ransom. They paid a ransom demand of about $4 million to get back access to their system. I mean, luckily for them, the FBI was able to recover a significant amount of that $4 million, but some of us would not be so fortunate. So ransomware is a form of malware designed to encrypt files on the device, rendering the device files on the system that rely on them unusable. So you'll get a pop-up, something that looks similar to the one on the screen. It will give you a countdown, some threatening message that if you don't pay the ransom in 3 days, we're going to expose your file, or if you don't pay the ransom in 2 days, or whatever the time frame is, we're going to delete your files. Very, very dangerous form of malware. Right? But there are ways we can defend against ransomware. It's not the end of the world if you're infected with ransomware. And I've seen several companies recover successfully from ransomware. I've also seen companies not recover from ransomware. So it's a double-edged sword, I would say. So defending against ransomware, you want to back up your data and you want to verify the backups of the data, because I've seen companies back up their data, suffer the ransomware. When they restore the data, they restore the ransomware again. So you need to back up and verify. It's very important that you verify the backups that you're taking. It's also important that you secure the backup. So you either encrypt the backup, store it in an offsite vault or something like that, right? Keep your software up to date. Practice safe browsing. Only use secure networks. And I'm going to come back with an example to that in a second. Implement a security awareness program. Keep your software up to date, because most ransomware today will take advantage of vulnerabilities in the system. Again, let me touch on only use secure networks. So where my consultancy had some years ago, what I did is I was sitting in a restaurant, and I just did a quick scan of the network that was in the restaurant. I found the network pretty easily. I simply just took my own device and configured it with a network that looks very similar to the network in the restaurant and made it open. And in no time, person started to connect to my network. Now I say that to say connect to a secure network because you don't know who is behind the network. I was doing that for research purposes, but somebody is maybe doing that for nefarious reasons with the intent of collecting and stealing people's data. So only connect to secure network. If you must connect to an open network, network in an airport or a hotel or something like that, then what you do is layer on a VPN on top of that. So connect to the network, fine, right? But now when you need to do any kind of transactions, if you need to connect to a system at your office or so on, use a VPN, a virtual private network to connect to that. And we're suggesting that, or we're telling you to do that because all communications over a virtual private network or VPN is encrypted. So no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, you cannot see that connection. You cannot see the data that's being transmitted over a VPN. VPN networks are considered secure because the traffic that passes over a VPN network is encrypted, fully encrypted. In many instances, encrypted with the highest level of encryption that's available to those systems. Right? So again, ransomware very dangerous, but it's very recoverable from if we just pay attention a little bit. All right. We started to talk about mobile device earlier, so I'm going to kind of go through this a little quicker. Again, you'll see that a lot of the principles are similar. Update your security patches on the devices, install the security updates. Apple, Android, Microsoft, whatever will put out updates, so you want to implement those. Utilize a password vault for those persons who have 100 passwords and have difficulty memorizing them. There are lots of vaults that are modern today that are very safe to use. Disable Wi-Fi and Bluetooth when not needed. They absolutely don't need to be on all the time, only when you need to use it. All right, again, avoid open networks. Don't use jailbroken apps or anything that is cracked or anything like that. Don't use those because those are actually contain backdoors that will affect your systems. Again, back up the device regularly. Use lock screen, use device tracking. Apple, Microsoft, and Google, they all have device tracking and remote wipe features. You want to enable those on the devices so that the device is lost or stolen. You can simply remote wipe it and make it unusable to the person who has stolen it, or even if it's lost. All right, and again, install anti-malware. Anti-malware is a low-hanging fruit, very cost-effective. So install it and use it on your device. Cybersecurity or information security awareness training programs. You want to implement an awareness program in your organization. As the management of the organization, you want to take that responsible step and do that. But as employees and staff members, you need to participate in the program. So when the training videos and all of that sort of stuff go out, when the training is scheduled, take part in the training, participate, do the training and stuff like that. And just stay abreast, utilizing reputable forums and social media and other news platforms. There's a lot of information out there. You don't have to want to become a cyber expert. But there's enough information out there that just gives you an idea of what's taking place in the world, and just to raise your awareness and raise your curiosity. So specifically looking at the ports, I have this diagram up with a couple of different areas on the port. If you look at the facility, the port access facility, you want to ensure that you put in the proper secure mechanisms to allow people on and off the ports here. Different proper control systems to ensure that those can't be reached or can't be bypassed. Your terminal headquarters, you want to protect the data that's in those areas. There's regular protection of the data. You also want to look at ransomware protection specifically. You want to look at the operational technology system, again, your cranes, your sensors, your lifts, and so on. You want to put the requisite protection in place to ensure that those systems don't become compromised. Again, your positioning and navigation systems, you want to ensure that those are, you take the necessary measures. Again, and all of these things are simply, guys, they're simply computers, just in some different forms or another. So a lot of the things that we've been speaking about since morning are things that are applicable in this space. You want to look at your vessel navigation system to ensure that those are what we call air gapped as much as possible, meaning they're not connected to the internet as by 24/7 unless it's absolutely necessary. And you take those security measures and put them in place just to keep and secure your environment. So that's just a brief overview from the port side. But again, as I said, the devices that are operating the port are simply computers at a basic level. So all the things that we've spoken about before are applicable to those devices. Now, let me take a quick look at some examples and some use cases that have affected the shipping and logistics industry. Maersk may be the most popular or the one that is the most visible. They suffered a malware attack in 2017. Their systems was down, the outage duration of the outage was 9 days, so their systems were offline for a total of 9 days. 49,000 end user devices were affected, 1,200 applications, and 350 servers, 3,500 servers. Now, of all of these numbers, they actually had to destroy a significant percentage of these devices. Right? A significant percentage. They had to destroy in excess of 50% of these devices that were just unusable because they were so compromised with the malware. The recovery cost for them was estimated at US 300 million. Now, a recovery cost of 300 million in the Caribbean and Latin America is pretty heavy, no matter the industry, no matter the business that you're running right now. But so you want to look at that, and that was malware that was as a result of, again, a phishing email that somebody just did not have to click on, but they clicked on it and infected the organization with malware. So Maersk was the most common one. I still one of the ones that's referenced a lot today in case studies for your industry. Right? In 2019 and 2020, CMA CGM had a data breach and a suspected ransomware. Their e-commerce port platform was offline. For, I believe it was about 3 or 4 days. If I'm not mistaken. They haven't disclosed their recovery cost, but you can think of it, if their online portal and their web portal was offline for 9 days, it means that they would have lost a significant amount of money in terms of, processing, shipping, processing containers and so on. They didn't disclose what their recovery cost was, but again, another incident that happened in the shipping industry. Other incidents that have happened in the industry as early as this year. Expeditors International, they had a suspected ransomware attack. In February of this year, their systems were out for a total of 8 days. The system was completely down for 8 days. They have not disclosed the amount of devices that were affected or what the recovery costs were. But again, another big player in this industry affected by ransomware. Other suspected cyber attacks include the International Maritime Organization. They had a suspected ransomware. It has not been confirmed, but based on the information that's out there, they had an issue with their email system, and they said that they transferred it to another provider while they tried to recover their system. But insiders suspect that it was ransomware. Mediterranean Shipping Company and HMM also suffered suspected ransomware last year and earlier this year. Not a lot of information has been disclosed on those, but enough information has been disclosed to suggest that they suffered, that the breaches were confirmed. Right? So these are just some case studies, and this is just a sample of what happens in the industry. I remember Francis said at the top of the presentation that we should just go and Google. And if you do, just Google cybersecurity or cyber incidents in shipping, ports, and logistics. You will see lots and lots of examples. Some of them have been confirmed, some of them have not been confirmed. But the long and short of the story is these attacks are happening in the industry, and we have to prepare for these attacks. We have to take the necessary steps. We have to educate ourselves. We have to put in the requisite systems. And we have to partner with companies like ADVANTUM and so on that will help us in this particular area, that will help us to secure and prevent data breaches. I close with this final slide in my presentation. I mentioned it before. Cybersecurity is a journey and not a destination. It's a journey of risk management and continuous improvement. So when you think you've drawn the line in the sand, the line in the sand is really just a starting point for your next phase of review. It's a process of continuous risk assessment, continuous review, and continuous improvement. You will never get to a place where you're 100% secure, but that's your goal. You're constantly moving toward that place, and it's a method of continuous improvement, continuous review, continuous evaluation. So again, that's the extent of my presentation for today. Guys, I want to thank you for your time. I hope I would have conveyed some very important pieces of information for you today. And I will open the forum for any discussion, any questions that you may have. I'll be only too happy to assist with providing answers or clarification on anything that we presented today.
Thank you, John. Colleagues, the floor is open. Any questions, comments?
Hi, good morning. This is Susan Augustine.
Good morning, Susan.
Okay. It's not really a question, but maybe you can provide some insight into it. We, at some point, had a company that did penetration testing for us, and then they proposed the security management option for us. Now, when we proceeded to ask them after reviewing their proposal, when you talk about one of the ways of transferring the risk, outsourcing or insurance. So when we asked them about observing some of the risks, if you're going to manage our IT security, what are some of the risks that you would observe? What are you, going to be responsible for? And we asked them actually to put it in writing. And at that point, they were unwilling to do that, to say that they're going to observe some of the risks. Is that something, is that a norm for those companies that you outsource to, that they wouldn't actually document that? Or how do we go about having something in writing to say, okay, we're gonna hand this functionality over to you, you're managing it. How are we gonna share the risks?
So I would love to talk to you offline to get some more specifics on that. But I say that to say, I can't recall encountering a company that would take such a position, especially when you look at the managed security service providers, that the reputable ones that are in the space. So what they will do is they will help you before they fully take on the management of your infrastructure. They will work with you and they will identify a plan that will start to put some things in place that will help to mitigate the risk. Once that becomes a working process, then they will accept and absorb some of the risk, because both of you would have had a plan. So you would have made a commitment to do A, B, C. They would have also made a commitment to the CDE, right, as part of the engagement. So they will accept risks that are associated with C, D, and E, but you are to put things in place for A and B. So it's a process of working together. So I'm guessing those specifics are not shared here, but what I've come across is that, yes, they're not gonna fully accept the risk, taking on your risk, without both of you working together in mitigating the risk. They will absorb it once you have a plan in place that says, all right, here are your responsibilities toward this risk, here are my responsibilities toward this risk. And we are agreeing that together, if we work along this path, then the risk will be mitigated. So I will be responsible for a portion of it, you will be responsible for a portion of it.
Okay. I have another question. In terms of two-factor authentication, is that something that is applied to all users, or can you apply that to like a group of users?
So you have the flexibility of doing both. It just depends on what your implementation scenario looks like. I've seen examples where organizations have identified some high target employees, employees who always get phishing emails and such like that, and they've implemented two-factor authentication just for them and not for the rest of the organization. So a lot of the systems that do two-factor authentication allows you the flexibility to do it for everybody or just do it for a subset of the organization. So you can do both. It just depends on your implementation plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that intervention, Susan. Anyone else? Any questions, comments?
I would just like to address both to John and Robert, something that we have discussed. As we know, over the past 2 years, a lot of us have gone into work from home mode. And, just looking at cybersecurity and what measures have to be put in place, is there a greater risk for systems when you go into a work from home mode? Or maybe Robert can just expand a bit, and John as well. What approaches have we taken as Advantum to mitigate against those risks?
So let me touch it from a general perspective first, and then Robert can probably tackle it specifically from the Advantum perspective. So work from home actually does increase the risk quite a bit, especially the risk of physical theft or loss of devices or physical damage of devices. We've seen a situation where users keep returning their laptops saying the screen is broken, and we ask them about it. It was on a table that their children running past and hit it and it fall off, or they're working next to a window, get up and gone, somebody walking by and seeing the laptop and just reaching the window and snatch the device. So your risk has actually increased. Also, users are connecting from an untrusted network. Now, that has actually given rise to the acceleration of a concept in security known as zero trust or zero trust environment. Pretty much what that means is that you do not trust anything or any device that you cannot see or physically touch at a given time, right? And in doing zero trust, what you do is there are methodologies and processes that you now put in place. So because you know that your user is connecting from a network that you absolutely don't trust, because you don't know what they're doing on their home network, what are the devices connected to their home network, and so on and so forth. You have to put in technologies in place to protect your asset from those assets. So again, you start to do things like for somebody working from home, the laptop can't leave the office unless it's fully encrypted, i.e. the data is encrypted or the disk is encrypted, right? Any communication back to the office must happen over a virtual private network. So even if they try to connect over a network that's not a VPN network, then they should get some message that tell them that they can't do it and stuff like that. So yes, the risk has actually increased significantly. Get into a situation where, family members can access the machine, can access the device, can access the data. So we tell users to do the same thing, lock the device. Don't let your family members use the device. Operate with clean desk policies, so your files and documents and all of those things. Lock them away, put them in a drawer, put them in a cabinet, put them in your bag, and that sort of stuff. So yes, the risk has increased. It has given rise to the concept of zero trust, so where we just don't trust anything outside of the confines of the office, and then you're putting the requisite technology and processes in place for that to mitigate against that risk.
All right, so being specific to Advantum, Francis, to answer your question, a lot of those that John has spoken about, we have implemented, and especially from a VPN perspective, you have to connect to the VPN to get back to the network to work. And because of the segmentation we spoke about, your VPN, users, based on your authentication and what you're allowed to access in terms of files and shares like that, can only happen through that VPN tunnel, right? And from our perspective, in terms of administrators, we do monitor the VPN traffic to see who is connecting, and not necessarily what they're doing, but we know. So if and in terms of alerting, we do have alerting. So if there's a failed authentication, we get an email to say this user tried to connect, incorrect password or whatever. We may contact the user or things like that, but we know what is happening, right? From a monitoring perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you, John, Robert. Anyone else? Questions, comments? All right, following on from Francis' question, either to you, John or Robert, and I noticed, John, you like to seem to do some impromptu research, especially in the restaurant. But in your experience and from your research, what would you advise would be the major weaknesses that you have observed that we need as to be aware of and kind of mitigate against in cybersecurity, given all the information that you've given us?
So the number one thing that I've come across is how do I put that? Is unpatched systems or old applications. Now, there is also a concept in information security called zero-day exploits, zero vulnerabilities. What that means is that there's a vulnerability in an application or service that is not widely known or is not known about at all, but some researcher may have been testing the application and found it. Sometimes they alert the vendor that, look, there's an issue with this application that needs to be patched and whatever. If the vendor is aggressive or is not, they don't look favorably upon that, then that person may in turn just publish it on the dark web, and therefore it's exploited. So the number one thing that I've seen, the number one area would be of concern for me would be unpatched or applications and systems that are not up to date. Because any one of those systems that don't have the most recent security up to date or the most recent security patch or recent application update is easily exploitable. So I would start there. I would start by doing either a vulnerability assessment or a penetration testing, just to get an idea of, what the weaknesses are. But I can guarantee you that in doing that assessment, you're going to come back with a significant amount of vulnerabilities relating to unpatched application. So that would be the number one. Following closely behind that would be a user or an employee workforce that is not cyber aware. Not saying they need to be cyber expert, but they're not cyber aware. So they don't know the difference between, or they're not able to identify the difference between a real email and a phishing email. They are excited about clicking on links and so on and stuff like that in email. So those will be the two top things that I've seen. Follow on that, then you enter into things like network security, as we spoke about servers misconfiguration and that sort of stuff. Incorrect privileges being applied to devices and so on. But at the top level would be unpatched application, and then a user community following very closely on that is not cyber aware.
And John, I'd also like to follow on that. So not only unpatched applications and operating systems and things like that, but also especially now with work from home being so critical and systems need to be up 24/7. I mean, administrators sometimes have a challenge. That's network administrators have a challenge in getting those systems offline, so to speak. So I mean, managers and things like that need to give us, the administrators, a time to implement those patches, So we need a system for all. And when you're talking about systems, we're talking about your perimeter systems, your firewall. So a firewall, most firewalls that have an operating systems also, if those are not updated, then it's vulnerable. So we want to keep those up to date, and we need the downtime to do those sort of things.
Yes, it's better to give your administrators that 1 hour to fix the system rather than have the system out for 1 day.
Malcolm, you have another question?
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Malcolm Charles from the Antigua Barbuda, the Port Authority. There is a concern that I have. I notice every time someone comes into the office to go meet with the port manager or whoever, they always seem to need to get Wi-Fi access. You understand? And I'm saying to myself, why would I go into a network and always be asking for that? Why is it that other people are not conscious of the fact that, hey, yes, it's a network and you can compromise your device. So right now I'm to the point where I'm thinking of putting up signs around the boardrooms, basically telling you, hey, if you connect, there's a possibility your machine will be compromised, just to mitigate against that. But I guess you have a better way of handling something like that. I mean, the other side of it is, even if you have your system well put together from a security standpoint, there's still a possibility that someone might have some malware on their system that is one of those 0-day that is gonna exploit your system. You understand? So I'm trying to find the best way to kind of manage, especially the fact where you might have a manager that you explain to them the risk that you're incurring, but they're just saying, hey, just give the person the access. But then at the end of the day now, when something happens, you have to spend 2-3 days to recover. So how do you deal with that kind of situation? This is a human factor, handling that aspect, especially, with your manager and the fact that he can overpower you.
Yeah,
So,
okay, John.
so your sign is probably something that I would do. So don't think any less of that actual sign. So yes, your sign is actually something that I would do. I would put up a sign that says, look, if you're connected to this network, we can't guarantee that your machine will not be compromised. Right? We can't guarantee. But if you take a step back, and I know your managers will want to veto any decision that you would have made with that, and you might come and say, listen, I am the manager. I'm telling you to make this guy connect to the network. There is actually a relatively simple solution to that problem. Again, it just depends on how much money you're willing to spend. What we do to mitigate against that is we have two things. We do two things. We implement network access control so that no machine that we don't trust or authorize can connect to our network. So we start there. But a little before you even get to implementing some kind of network access control solution, what we do is we just implement a best effort guest wireless. So we get a consumer grade wireless from one of the providers that you pay a very small amount of money for, and you spin that up, and them can connect to that, because at the end of the day, what do they want to do? They want to connect to the network so that they can access internet or their email and stuff like that. Those things don't need to come through your network. Those things are not bandwidth intensive, right? If somebody come to your office for a meeting, they should be there for a very finite period of time, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that. So if they're planning to do streaming any movies or anything like that, then I'm sorry, it sucks for them. They have to give them the wireless, give them a guest network that is a best effort connection. They can connect to that. It will be sufficient for them to browse and get their email. But beyond that, that would be my response. That would be my response to that. And by all means, put up your sign. Put up your sign. We can't guarantee that you won't compromise us, and we can't guarantee that we won't compromise you. We have done the best we can to secure our network, but there could be, as you rightly said, there could be a 0-day out there that we don't know about. And it's on both ends. So yes, put up your sign, but also put in a guest network, and longer term, try something like network access control. And network access control, you don't necessarily have to spend massive money on it. If you have Microsoft Active Directory in your environments, Microsoft Active Directory actually allows you to do what I call a poor man NAC. You can implement for, pretty much using the licenses that you already have in place for your Windows servers and so on, and maybe spend not a lot more money on top of that.
Okay, thank you. Antonia, yes. Thank you, Malcolm. Go ahead, Antonia.
Hi. Yes, good morning. So my question is it relates to small companies whose budget is small, but they still want to implement cybersecurity controls. Let's say they have a small budget. What would be like the top 3 or 5, let's say, critical network infrastructure you would recommend that they put their money into? And also, which of the risk management tasks, or like how do you handle the whole idea of risk management on a small budget, as well as network infrastructure? How do you handle those on a small budget?
So they're on a small budget. I think the beauty about the cybersecurity landscape is that it's very, very mature. So there is a solution pretty much for every budget level. I find from time to time we kind of get lost in we view I think we call them that. We view North America and Europe and so on, and we view the solutions that they are implementing there. And we view the companies that are providing these solutions. And we think to ourselves, boy, we can't do that, you know. So we get crippled and not do anything. But there are several entities that offer solutions that are going for any budget. But in terms of specifics, you want to implement for a small business with a small budget. First and foremost, you want to invest in perimeter security. And that would mean you're investing in a device like a next gen firewall or a unified threat management device. What that means is that you're spending one amount of money and you're getting firewalling capabilities, you're getting intrusion prevention, you're getting gateway anti-malware, you're getting denial of service prevention, you're getting anti-phishing and so on, all of that in one device. And that device will sit at the very edge of your perimeter. Stepping on the inside of your network now, then now you utilize the security capabilities in the device that you already own on the licenses that you already have. So for argument's sake, if you're using Windows machines actually do come in quite a bit of controls that you can implement to secure the machine for identity and access management, for authentication. Most, Windows 10, Windows 11, and so on now is actually shipped with its own anti-malware solution, which is pretty good actually. So you don't necessarily have to go out and buy a separate anti-malware solution. Windows Defender is actually a pretty good anti-malware solution now. So you could utilize those tools. Stepping back on the risk management side of things, rather than go out and buy, a risk management tool that's specific for that, you could actually utilize a Microsoft solution. Actually, Excel does a pretty good risk management if you're good with Excel. I'm pretty sure you can find somebody in finance who can build out an Excel spreadsheet for you, and you can use that to track and manage your risk in place. But I would say at the very beginning, do a couple of things. One, get yourself a unified threat management device, right? And that will give you a lot of protection in a single footprint. And of course, you want to buy two so that if one break, it can fail over to the other. But again, the cost is not enterprise grade cost. It will just depend on the spec. And those devices are spec'd based on the amount of traffic for your business. So if your business is a small business that only run a certain amount of traffic, then the device will be spec'd and cost there for that. And then I would also allocate some kind of funding. Again, it's not one size fits all. It's very tailored to do penetration testing and vulnerability assessment. So those would be maybe the top three things that I would do. Get a UTM device for your perimeter, do penetration and vulnerability testing, and utilize the controls that are already present in the devices that you're already using.
Thank you for that intervention, Antonia. Anyone else?
Oh, thank you very much as well. I wanted to just continue the conversation about risk management.
Certainly.
My question is more about, okay, the persons who are doing the risk management, what type of qualification, what type of training could the IT staff sit down and complete the risk management, or is that something you need to get trained persons to do?
It would actually be better if you could get somebody with risk management training, because risk management is a discipline all by itself, whether you apply that to your business or cybersecurity or whatever. So it would be better if you have the ability to get somebody with risk management expertise already to do that for you. But failing that, it is a skill that's learnable. It's a trainable area. So you could have your IT team, or primarily your IT management team, I would say, do some kind of risk management training. There are a couple of institutions that probably offer the training. ISACA is one that comes to mind right now, which is what they have some frameworks and so on that you can use to help you with that. The COVID framework is one. But ISACA would be a paid engagement. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, referred to as NIST, actually offer a risk management framework that is easily digestible, I believe. So you could look at that to start.
Okay, thank you very much.
But NIST would actually be a good, since we're talking about small budget, NIST is freely available. The entire framework is freely available, and it's easily digestible. So you could take a look at NIST.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Any other? We're wrapping up now. We have already gone to 12 o'clock, which is a good thing. I don't think that we noticed how quickly the time flew. Any final questions, comments for John or Robert? Okay, well, that being the case, I'd like to, on behalf of the Port Management Association of the Caribbean, the organization generally and specifically the participants today, want to thank both John and Robert for an interesting, informative presentation. I'd also like to thank Frances and her team at ADVANTUM, Tashay and Kay, for the collaboration in making it possible to deliver this information to you, which I trust the participants will utilize as best as possible in the application of their own tasks at their various ports. So I don't know if you have any closing remarks, Francis, but I just wanted to extend that that sentiment on behalf of PMAC and the participants this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you to John, to Robert, and thank you, Glenn, for giving us this opportunity to collaborate with PMAC again. I'd love to invite persons to visit our website at advantumpcs.com, and you can email us if you have any further questions. We will be doing a follow-up email after this. I'm just telling you about network assessment, just a high-level network assessment that we are offering right now. A sit down with Robert and some of the technical team, and to explore some of these issues in greater detail. But we really would like to see more and more persons take cybersecurity more seriously. And as John has said, yes, we're in the Caribbean, we are small, relative to the rest of the world, but we have to be aware. We have to take precautions so that our businesses can keep on running and running efficiently. So thank you. Thanks again, Glenn. Have a good day, everyone.
Okay, well, that being said, I want to wish all of you an enjoyable day. And thank you for your interest and participation. You can stay tuned as PMAC continues its program of training, and look up for any relevant training that might be coming your way. So thanks again, and good day to everybody.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everybody. Have a good day.
Okay, goodbye.
Bye.
Okay, goodbye.
All right.